for this one we want to talk about changes in our aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Now, instead of looking just at price and quantity like we would in the demand and supply graphs, now we're looking at the overall production and demand for goods and services for the economy. So the P now is basically our price level instead of just the price, and then our gross domestic product. Okay, so if we have an increase in aggregate demand, okay, so if aggregate demand increases, for example, if the government reduces taxes, or the government increases transfer payments, or the Federal Reserve decreases the interest rate by increasing the quantity of money, aggregate demand will shift to the right. Okay, so now what's going to happen, our price level is going to increase. Our real GDP is going to increase. So when we have an increase in aggregate demand, we're going to see price level increase and real GDP will increase as well. Okay, so let's say the government does something else to decrease the aggregate demand. Let's say they raise taxes, or they increase the Federal Reserve increases the interest rate, or maybe foreign incomes decrease. Okay, so if we have a decrease in aggregate demand, a decrease in aggregate demand will shift the aggregate demand curve to the left. And when that happens, our price level comes down and real GDP goes down. So price level and real GDP both decrease. Okay? Increases in aggregate demand will increase price level, increase real GDP. Decreases in aggregate demand will decrease price level and decrease real GDP. Now on aggregate supply, if we have changes in say technology or the amount of capital, let's say we have immigration increases, and that's going to increase the amount that we are able to produce, or let's say technology improves. So our aggregate supply would shift to the right. Okay, so if aggregate supply increases, what's going to happen? Our price level should come down and our real GDP should increase. Okay, so if we have an increase in aggregate supply, that's going to shift to the right. That's going to decrease the price level and increase real GDP. Now, if we have a decrease in aggregate supply, let's say the price of fuel goes up, that will cause what we call a cost push shock, and that's going to shift the aggregate supply to the left. Okay, so if we have that happen, we'll see price level increase and real GDP decrease. Okay, so if aggregate supply decreases, price level increases and real GDP decreases. Okay, so when we lose a lot of labor because the baby boomers are all retiring, that's going to shift our aggregate supply curve to the left, and that's going to cause us to have an increase in price level and a decrease in our gross domestic product.